In 1511, the governor of Mecca ordered the city's coffeehouses closed. Officials moved through the streets, shutting doors, confiscating beans, and breaking up the groups that had gathered around bowls of a dark, bitter drink. The governor, Care Beg, argued that coffee was changing public behavior. It kept men awake long after evening prayers. It encouraged them to sit together, trade rumors, debate religion, criticize officials, and discuss events beyond the control of the mosque or palace. Religious scholars were asked to decide whether the drink should be treated like wine and prohibited as an intoxicant. Coffee drinkers were questioned. The beans were burned. Yet the ban did not last. Higher authorities in Cairo rejected it, and coffee returned. That failure mattered. A government had tried to suppress a beverage, not because it made people unconscious, but because it made them alert. Wine weakened attention, coffee sharpened it. And a room full of wakeful people, talking for hours, could become something more dangerous than a tavern. It could become a network. The officials of Mecca were not overreacting to a strange new taste. They had recognized, almost immediately, that coffee could reorganize time, conversation, and public life. Today, coffee is so ordinary that its power hides inside routine. It waits beside kitchen sinks, appears in office kitchens, passes through drive-through windows, and arrives in paper cups before millions of people have fully formed their first thought of the day. It is one of the world's most valuable traded agricultural products, grown across tropical regions and consumed far from the places where the plant can survive. Entire cities seem to move through a sequence of coffee rituals. The cup before work, the meeting over coffee, the afternoon refill, the late-night drink used to finish what daylight did not. Yet coffee did not become universal simply because people enjoyed bitterness. It became universal because it offered something societies repeatedly learned to value: wakefulness on demand. A tired body once imposed a limit. Coffee made that limit negotiable. First, it helped worshippers remain awake. Then, it helped merchants exchange information. Then it helped states tax trade, plantations extract labor, armies maintain attention, factories extend effort, and offices normalize exhaustion. The history of coffee is not only the history of a drink, it is the history of what happened when human beings discovered that rest could be postponed, packaged, sold, and eventually treated as a personal obstacle to productivity. Before daily stimulants, darkness carried more authority. This does not mean people simply fell asleep at sunset, or that pre-modern life followed one perfect natural rhythm. Guards stood watch. Sailors worked through the night. Midwives answered calls at impossible hours. Farmers rose before dawn. Religious communities kept nocturnal vigils, and many people slept in patterns that changed with season, climate, danger, and social custom. But artificial light was costly, nighttime travel was risky, and most work was still constrained by the body and the sun. Fatigue could be resisted, but resisting it required urgency, discipline, or suffering. The exhausted body remained a practical barrier to what rulers, merchants, and employers could demand. Coffee did not erase that barrier, but it introduced a repeatable method for pushing against it. Caffeine interferes with the brain's perception of mounting sleep pressure. It does not create energy from nothing, and it does not repay the rest being delayed. It changes the signal. That distinction would become central to modern work. Coffee offered the sensation that a limit had been removed when, in reality, the limit had only been muted. The first people to use it could not have known the chemistry. They only knew that after drinking it, the night became longer. The plant itself came from the highlands of northeastern Africa, most likely Ethiopia, but the famous origin story is not reliable history. Most people have heard of Kaldi, the goat herder, who supposedly noticed his animals dancing after eating red coffee cherries. In the legend, Kaldi brought the fruit to monks, who turned it into a drink that kept them awake through prayer. The story is memorable, visual, and almost certainly a later invention. The earliest surviving versions appeared centuries after coffee was already being consumed. The truth is less tidy and more important. Coffee was likely used in different forms before anyone produced the drink we would recognize today, and it was in Yemen that cultivation, roasting, brewing, and organized trade became firmly established. By the 15th century, Sufi communities were using coffee during long devotional gatherings. They called on it not as a morning pleasure, but as a tool of attention. The body grew tired. The ritual continued. Coffee helped the worshipper remain present. This was the first great transformation. A wild plant became a disciplined technology of wakefulness. But once the drink left religious circles and entered markets, it no longer served only prayer. It served conversation, commerce, and the unpredictable intelligence of crowds. Coffeehouses spread through Yemen and across major cities of the Islamic world, appearing in places such as Mecca, Cairo, Damascus, and Istanbul. They were social spaces built around a new kind of intoxication, not the loss of control, but the extension of attention. Patrons listened to music, watched performances, played games, heard stories, discussed prices, repeated news, and argued over politics and religion. A merchant arriving from another port could describe shortages or wars. A traveler could bring a rumor from the court. A poem could circulate before it appeared in writing. Coffee allowed the gathering to continue, and the gathering gave the drink political meaning. Authorities repeatedly became suspicious. In different times and places, rulers attempted restrictions, closures, or moral campaigns against coffeehouses. Their concern was rarely just the beverage. The real problem was the room. Information moved laterally between ordinary people rather than downward from official institutions. The coffeehouse created an audience without asking permission, and an audience could become public opinion. The cup was small, but the network around it was not. Coffee had begun as a solution to fatigue. It had become a tool for assembling alert strangers. Once that happened, every government had to decide whether to tolerate the room, monitor it, tax it, or shut it down. When coffee reached European cities in the 17th century, it entered societies already being transformed by print, oceanic trade, religious conflict, and early financial markets. The drink was foreign, expensive, and suspicious. Some critics treated it as an exotic threat. Others praised it as a sober alternative to alcohol. The clean contrast is often exaggerated. Europeans did not spend every morning helplessly drunk before coffee arrived. But in crowded cities where weak beer, ale, or wine were common daily beverages, coffee offered a different social effect. It prepared people to calculate rather than forget. London coffeehouses developed distinct clienteles. Merchants gathered in one, writers in another, sailors and shipowners somewhere else. Newsletters, prices, shipping reports, political pamphlets, and gossip circulated with the cups. Edward Lloyd's coffeehouse became a meeting place for people involved in maritime trade and insurance, eventually giving its name to Lloyd's of London. Jonathan's coffeehouse became associated with brokers trading shares and commodities near Exchange Alley, part of the world from which London's organized securities market developed. Coffee did not invent insurance, finance, journalism, or revolution. It made certain kinds of sustained, information-heavy interaction easier. It gave commerce a room and attention a business model. By the way, if you have made it this far, you probably already see the pattern. This channel is not really about drinks or objects, it is about the systems hiding inside them. So if that kind of history interests you, subscribe. Now, back to the part the elegant coffeehouses preferred not to discuss. Europe could consume coffee at growing scale only by taking control of where it was grown. For a time, merchants in Yemen protected the trade by exporting beans that could not easily be planted. But botanical control never lasts forever when empires see profit. The Dutch acquired viable coffee plants and developed production in their Asian colonies, especially Java. Colonial officials imposed quotas and forced local farmers to deliver crops through systems designed to benefit distant markets. The name Java eventually became casual shorthand for coffee, while the coercion that made the island famous faded from the word. French cultivation expanded in the Caribbean, including Martinique and Saint-Domingue. The romantic story says that a French naval officer, Gabriel de Clou, protected a coffee seedling during a difficult Atlantic voyage and shared his water ration with it. Whatever the exact details, Stories like this turn plantation expansion into heroic adventure. They place one determined European and one fragile plant at the center, while pushing enslaved labor, seized land, punishment, and ecological transformation to the edges. Coffee spread through the same imperial machinery that moved sugar, tobacco, and cotton. Forests were cleared. People were enslaved or forced into brutal labor regimes. Fortunes accumulated in ports thousands of miles from the fields. The drink associated with clear thought in European coffeehouses depended on a supply chain designed to keep consumers from seeing clearly. The contradiction became even larger in the Americas. Saint-Domingue, the French colony that later became Haiti, grew into one of the world's great coffee-producing regions through enslaved labor. Revolution destroyed the colonial order there, but global demand did not disappear. Production shifted and expanded elsewhere. Brazil rose during the 19th century to dominate the coffee trade. Its plantations relied heavily on enslaved Africans until slavery was abolished in 1888, and afterward many estates depended on poorly paid immigrant and local labor working within systems shaped by the old plantation economy. Coffee wealth financed railroads, ports, banks, political influence, and urban growth. It helped build modern institutions while preserving extreme inequality beneath them. This is the hidden arithmetic of the cup. Stimulation for the consumer, exhaustion for the producer. The person drinking coffee received a few hours of sharpened attention. The people cultivating it gave years of bodily labor. Useful things have a dangerous destiny. Eventually, someone tries to own them. Empires could not own wakefulness itself, but they could own land, shipping routes, labor, warehouses, credit, and access to the markets where wakefulness was sold. What began as a sacred aid to prayer had become a global machine for transferring energy from one class of people to another. By the 19th and early 20th centuries, coffee entered industrial work more directly. Factory labor demanded punctuality, repetition, and attention across long shifts organized by the clock rather than the sun. Workers reached for coffee because exhaustion was immediate and the drink was comparatively cheap. Employers did not need to invent the habit. The conditions of work made the habit useful. A stimulant could make another hour feel possible. That did not mean coffee created the factory system, but it helped bodies survive rhythms the factory system imposed. During wars, military rations helped turn coffee into a standardized necessity for soldiers who faced night watches, marches, cold camps, and long periods of fear interrupted by sudden action. Instant coffee made preparation faster and distribution easier. Returning soldiers carried the habit home. In offices and factories, the coffee break later became both a small relief and a management tool, a controlled pause intended to restore attention so production could resume. The break acknowledged fatigue without allowing fatigue to decide the length of the working day. Rest was no longer simply taken when the body required it. It was scheduled, measured, and often accompanied by a substance that prepared the worker to return. What began as a way to extend prayer had become a way to extend the shift. The modern coffee system is more sophisticated because it rarely presents itself as discipline. It presents itself as personality. Coffee is marketed as craft, comfort, sophistication, rebellion, productivity, self-care, and personal taste. Consumers learn the language of origins, roasts, brewing methods, milk textures, and seasonal flavors. Cafes offer a soft public space between home and work, while laptops turn that space into an unofficial office. None of this is false. Coffee can be pleasurable, communal, and culturally meaningful. But beneath the variety, its central function remains familiar. It helps people feel ready when they are not rested. The student uses it to continue studying. The driver uses it to stay alert. The parent uses it after a broken night. The office worker uses it before a meeting scheduled earlier than the body would choose. The freelancer uses it to stretch work across time zones. Modern society calls these individual choices, but millions of similar choices can reveal a system. We built schedules that routinely produce fatigue, then sold ourselves a drink that makes fatigue easier to ignore. Coffee became the solution to a problem that the organization of work keeps recreating. The governor of Mecca feared coffee because he believed alert people might become difficult to control. He saw the danger in the gathering. He did not foresee the larger reversal. Power would not need to destroy coffee. Power would absorb it. States would tax it. Empires would plant it. Merchants would globalize it. Armies would ration it. Employers would build breaks around it. Brands would turn it into identity. Coffee would become so cheap, familiar, and emotionally comforting that its role in the system would nearly disappear. The drink did not free humanity from exhaustion. It made exhaustion more manageable, and therefore easier to normalize. That is why its history matters. A need for wakefulness produced a solution. The solution became a tool. The tool attracted trade and political suspicion. Trade became empire. Empire became industry. Industry turned postponed rest into a daily ritual. The cup in your hand may be personal, but the rhythm behind it is historical. Coffee did not create modern work by itself. It taught modern work one of its most useful tricks. When the body says stop, change the signal instead of changing the demand. The bitter drink did not conquer sleep. It made us feel responsible for defeating it. Subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments which ordinary habit or object you want history to make strange again.